I'm Erica Lukes, host of UFO Classified. For me, life isn't simply black and white. Life is full of many unknowns. It is my goal to travel the world and to work with the world's leading experts in the hopes of making groundbreaking discoveries. Join me on UFO Classified Friday nights at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, only on KCOR.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Good afternoon, good evening. I'm Erica Lukes. I was happy to be here on a Friday evening with my friends. I appreciate every week getting into chat and seeing the usual crew. And you mean the world to me. You can find out more about my work and support the show at ufoclassified.com or ericalukes.com. I will be putting more things up. In fact, I am working on editing right now an hour-and-a-half video interview with Chris Marks, who you've heard me talk about. He's been on the show before. He worked for Bigelow Aerospace, and so that will be a very informative interview about Skinwalker Ranch, and you actually get to see him and get a little bit more in depth. So that should be coming out tomorrow. So look for that on my website, and I'll post links for that. I am here right now with somebody who has been in the field for a long, long time and who does exceptional work. I have looked at Keith's blog for a long time, and you can go back and just really see how methodical he is with regard to research. He has been interested in the UFO, the aerial phenomena, since the 60s, and has held a variety of roles in numerous Australian, state, national, and international organizations studying the phenomena. His work has appeared in various state, national, international newsletters, magazines, and journals. Between 2003 and 2008, he was involved in a search for Australian government documents relating to UAP. And we will hear more about that. He is currently has a wonderful catalog. He works with the likes of Dr. Anthony Clark, Paul Dean, and there's so much more. But Keith, I can't believe this is the first time I'm talking to you. And I'm so glad that we finally are. But my goodness, you're such an amazing researcher. I should have reached out to you a long time ago.
Good evening, Erica. Yes, there are a large number of people in the field, and unfortunately, time prevents us from ever catching up with a number of people that we'd love to. I think, like you, there'd be a great dinner party where you'd like to invite half a dozen people to sit around for an evening's chat. But we never get round to that, unfortunately. I
know, but at least here we are. So we're here tonight, and I get to pick your brain and learn from you, and so does our audience, which is wonderful. So you became interested in this subject back in the 60s. What specifically prompted your interest?
Well, at that stage, I was living in England. And as a teenager, I lived in a very isolated village, country village. We had really great dark night skies, so that intrigued me. At an early age, unfortunately, I had a bad case of asthma, and so I was quite often up during the night coughing my heart out. But at the same time, I used to lean out of my second-story bedroom window and look at the sky, and became very, very intrigued by the possibility of some other intelligence being out there. So that was really at a very early age, before I was 10 years old, basically, and then through my teens. But really it started in the mid-1960s, 1 year in about 1966 in the UK, as in the US. There was a large number of UFO reports in England, and reports were coming in from right across the country. Aircraft crew were seeing things, police cars were chasing objects, and literally dozens and dozens of civilians were reporting things. So I sat down as a teenager and I studied the available data because I was doing science at high school. And it seemed to me that some of the sightings were explainable in mundane terms like stars, planets, balloons. And one of the police cars was almost certainly chasing after the planet Venus. So I came to the thought that maybe you can have a look scientifically at the subject. But with other cases of sightings, I couldn't see any conventional explanation. And at around that time, I got interested through a local library reading books on the subject. And the first book I came across was a book by Jacques Vallée. And I thought, well, here's an astronomer who's actually studying the subject. I'm interested in astronomy. Maybe I should read this book. So that's where really I got hooked in the 1960s, where I found it was possible to study the subject using the sort of scientific method. So that's really where my interest started. So you can thank Jacques Vallée for getting me involved.
Well, I absolutely will. And I really respect him. He's my hero as well. I can pick up one of his books that I've read a million times and pick it up and thumb through it and find something new that just strikes me in a certain way. I mean, he's just amazing. And do you remember what book you picked up by his?
His first two books, I think, his first one was Anatomy of the Phenomena, and then there would be the second one, Challenge to Science. And I just loved the way that he explored methodically, logically, and was looking for alternate explanations to start with before accepting that it could be something a little bit extraordinary. So it was really his methodology that did it for me, I suppose.
Absolutely. So have you ever had a sighting?
I only had some very vague lights in the sky sightings. Probably the most prominent one happened with a group of about 6 of us. A newspaper report told us that there were sightings in an area about 50 miles out of Adelaide. So we went and camped there one night. And we were sitting on a small hill overlooking a grain silo in the distance. Clear sky. We were just chatting away, and the full moon came up. Sun had just set. Full moon was up very close to the horizon. And all of a sudden, a brilliant light, probably as bright as Venus, appeared just to the side of the moon. And it sat there for a few seconds. Someone drew my attention to it, so we're all watching it. Some of us through binoculars. It just sat there to one side of the full moon and then moved in towards the moon, as far as it from our perspective, and then just disappeared. And it was there just for a few seconds. So I've only had those sort of vaguest of lights in the sky, even though that was a clear sky and only shortly after sunset. But I've never had a spectacular sighting at all.
Interesting. And, I too have been witness to the lights in the sky that were behaving incredibly. It was not a conventional anything that is explainable. They were very, very unique experiences. But it is interesting. What do you think? Because when I was with MUFON, a state director, we would oftentimes, a lot of people there would dismiss the lights in the sky cases. In fact, they would just kind of laugh them off and not really do, in my opinion, their due diligence to research things and figure out that maybe these objects aren't just a light in the sky. But what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that they still tell us something about the phenomena. I guess most people perhaps believe there's only little or small points of data in a light in the sky. But some of the most interesting things have been reported by large groups of people, and they are simply orbs of light moving somewhere. And if you get a case where you have multiple witnesses who see a light and you can triangulate it from several different directions and you can find out what its speed was, what its altitude was, that's still a few data points. And I guess it all depends really on the length of time as well. Somebody like Alan Hynek used to say that if a sighting lasted, say, less than a minute, you really couldn't draw a lot of conclusions from it. But they do tell us something, yes.
Absolutely. And so what are some of the places that you find particularly interesting? Because for me, there are definitely hot spots or window areas or, places like Skinwalker Ranch, the Uinta Basin, Yakima, the Indian reservation, where you see a lot of different types of things occurring. What are your thoughts on that?
One of the things that interested me or intrigued me was that after moving from England to Australia in 1968, I joined a local UFO group. And shortly after I did, we found that there was a particular area of our state which was having similar sort of activities. So through the newspapers, the local newspapers in this area, which was about 100 miles north of Adelaide, set in farming country, we actually found out that there were quite a number of reports from a very limited geographic area. So a small group of us went up to this particular farming area, talked to the local newspaper editor. He put us onto a few local farmers, and over a few weeks, mainly weekends, because we were working at that point, we went up and interviewed dozens of local farmers. And what we found was that a lot of them were reporting seeing nocturnal red floating lights at low altitude. And one night in particular, a slow-moving red light, which wasn't an aircraft, was seen by several groups of motorists. And by interviewing them and using trigonometry, it enabled us to show that the object, that particular red light, was at very low altitude and moving at very low speed. So that was our first sort of introduction to an area which was generating a number of reports. So we dug deeper and we spent days and days and days in the area and nights. And one of the particular things that I found with Jacques Savalle's later books was that he came across the association of the paranormal with visual sightings. But this was back in 1968. This was way before he had actually written these books. But what I'm going to relate does tie in with that. That I was interviewing one farmer, and he was telling me about a particular daylight sighting. He was in his shed, and he got what he could only describe as a mental impression. And the impression was to go outside and look at the sky, which he did begrudgingly. He went outside, and what he saw was a pearl-shaped object travelling at low speed, at low altitude, over some hills. And when I interviewed him, I said, well, what was this mental impression like? He said it was just like a voice. He said, I can't describe it. It was a feeling together with an associated sensation that I should go outside. He said, I thought it was ridiculous, but I went outside and I saw this object. And he said, you're the first person I've ever told that part of the story to. I've told them about seeing the object in the sky. So we just filed that away. And then we did some more research and looked through old newspapers from the area, and we found there were reports going back of unusual lights as early as the 1920s. So this is like almost 50 years before. But when we sat down and compared our notes, we found that apart from physical objects, there were reports of unusual sounds, clocks stopping by themselves. On one property, the owners reported all their crockery in their lounge moved and vibrated on several occasions. We were fortunate that there was a seismic station in that particular locality, and we went and had a look at the seismic records, talked to the person who was running the equipment, and we actually correlated the dates and times of these unusual movements in this house together with the seismic records, and there was no correlation at all. So that was a little odd that there were all these odd things as well as the sightings. But it got better because we ourselves, in sitting on hilltops at night, encountered unusual things ourselves. We spent nights on the hilltops in the area watching the skies. And like, for example, one time while on a hilltop, we used walkie-talkie radios between some people who were on a farming property, which had a reputation of the owners seeing UFOs over many years, together with us who communicating with us on the hillside, maybe a mile away. And 3 o'clock in the morning, the people at the farm radioed us and said they'd seen a ball of light rolling down the hill just below the crest where we were. We could see nothing from our end. But we ran down the hill in the dark. Our colleagues ran up the hill. We met in the middle, but the light had vanished. It was almost as if the light had only been visible from one side, which is crazy, a one-sided light, and not from the other. Yeah, another time I was walking up the same hill on a very cold night, and suddenly I ran into an area of warm air moving beyond it, it became cold again. I reversed my course, entered back and found the column of air was warm again. So by walking around the area, I found it was a column of warm air apparently radiating from the ground just a few yards across. So that was another oddity that we had. So apart from the unusual lights and unusual sounds, clocks stopping, unusual ground tremors, and oddities such as columns of warm air and one-sided balls of light, that was really the sort of thing which I hadn't come across before, which I guess is very similar to the sensations and sightings and feelings that people were experiencing at places like Skinwalker Ranch. So that was a really intriguing opportunity for me to see that there was more than the visual sightings that were occurring.
Okay, welcome back. I'm sorry about that. I've been having some issues with my Skype, and clearly that is just not working tonight. God bless the internet and Skype. But I am back, and Keith, I apologize for that, because you were talking about, you mentioned Skinwalker Ranch, and also the interesting sightings and places that you have been and witnessed. And it does remind me of not only Skinwalker, but also Norway with Project Touchstone.
Yeah, most definitely, yes. And I guess the interesting question that arises from that is, why are some localities recording higher rates of sightings and oddities than others? One of the things we did, and I guess it's showing our nerdness and our scientific approach, is we thought, well, if this small locality in our state is having such a large number of reports, is this happening anywhere else? And so we had access to a person who used to media monitor newspapers and radio stations and TV stations as a profession. And so we said to them, is this happening anywhere else in our state of South Australia? And they said, no, it's not. So what we did is we took another area, another farming area about 100 miles away from the area we were working with, and we had a local contact with the editor of the newspaper. And so we monitored through him anything that was being recorded in that area. And over a period of about a year, our area was still generating dozens and dozens of reports, but our little control sample area 100 miles away was generating nothing. So we also were keeping across what was happening over the whole of the state, and there was nothing similar happening anywhere else at all. It was just happening in the one small area, which geographically would have been only a few square miles across. So the thought is, why do these limited areas generate so much activity and other areas don't? And I guess then you've got to compare it to the idea that certain individuals have more UFO encounters and sightings than other people. So you've got this comparison between limited geographical areas who have activity and individuals who have a higher level of activity than other people do. Say, for example, for myself, almost nothing compared to some people. And there's this balance. Perhaps if you put certain individuals in certain geographic areas, that would really tell you something about what was going on. So that's an interest that I had very early on. So I encountered one of these window areas almost as soon as I got interested in the phenomena, which I think was just luck, but perhaps not. You never know.
Well, and it's so interesting to me, and I think you hit it right on the head. I really do believe that it is it's these specific areas and certain individuals that create this perfect storm for things to happen. You know, I absolutely believe that. You know, some people keep these people antennas, or Dr. Barry Taff was on my show last week and had another a poltergeist agent. You know, I mean, different terminology for the same types of things.
Yes.
What commonalities have you noticed in certain individuals that have a higher tendency to see things?
Well, one of the things I have done in my long career is that back in the 1990s, I brought together a group of psychologists, doctors, and lay people, and we conducted an Australia-wide search for people who were reporting abduction experiences. And over that period of time, I think 3 years altogether that we worked together, we interviewed over 100 individuals in Australia, scattered all over the country, who were reporting these experiences. And what we thought we would do is look at the personality types to start with. This is a basic thing. Is there any characteristics which are common amongst this group of people? So we
hear that music, and I've got to cut you off right there, and I really want to hear this, but we've got to take a quick break. I'm here with Keith Basterfield. Sure. We're going to take our first break. We'll be back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified. UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Toxins are everywhere, from the air we breathe to the food we eat and the water we drink. In a world where 80,000 known toxins and heavy metals threaten our very existence, how are you going to protect yourself and your loved ones? Introducing Pure Body Extra Strength, the world's first colloidal zeolite that helps trap and remove toxins as well as heavy metals from your body that are messing with your memory, clarity, sleep, and focus. Don't just take our word for it or the testimonials from our thousands of happy customers. Check out the hundreds of articles and case studies on the National Institute of Health website proving zeolite's powerful ability to remove toxins. For a limited time, listeners to KCOR will receive 10% off their first order. To get started, go to trypurebody.com and enter promo code Radio10. Again, that's trypurebody.com. Toxic junk is all around us, but now you can take back control of your health and protect yourself by detoxing with Pure Body Extra Strength. You'll be on your way to sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and feeling more energetic. Go to trypurebody.com right now and get started today.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
In the shadows, a voice cries out. Evidence that you're not alone.
You said my name. What is your name?
Proof that the living and the dead coexist. Or do they? Every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, join writer, producer, and paranormal investigator Greg Bakken on Ghost Box Radio as he explores, interviews, and investigates evidence alongside some of the best in the paranormal community and beyond.
6 people killed.
Ghost Box Radio, Wednesday nights exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, because the dead don't sleep. Ghost Box Radio.
We interrupt to bring you this.
Would you like to advertise on KCOR Digital Radio Network?
This is what I'm talking about.
At a fraction of the cost of traditional radio advertising, why not?
Tell them the good news.
Whether you need to promote your next book, product, or service, we can customize a package for just about any budget.
Finally, there is hope for the hopeless.
Why limit yourself to a tiny local market when KCOR can brand you to the world?
Here's all you do.
Visit KCORradio.com or contact our sales department by email at saleskcorradio.com.
We want it now!
See the difference with us by letting us work for you.
This ain't reality TV!
The KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Are you ready to go?
Turn the radio.
It's showtime!
Here we go, world. You're listening to the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Bring this up.
Broadcasting from the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada.
Their base is so large it has to draw most of its power from the nearby nuclear fusion plant.
The future of radio is here and now.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to UFO Classified. I'm always happy to be here on a Friday night. You can find me at UFOclassified.com, where I've got some cool new merchandise that when you purchase that, it helps support the show. Since this is a listener-supported show, all of that means a great deal to me. So go check it out, UFOclassified.com. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that I will be putting out a video tomorrow, an interview more in depth that I did with Chris Marks, talking about Bigelow, talking about Skinwalker Ranch, and really clearing the air on a few things. I also, in that video, have a lot of photographs that he took at the ranch on different investigations. So this is going to be a great interview, I think I look forward to getting out there for each of you. I am here now with someone who is an incredible researcher, very diligent. He is talking to us from Australia, and I have a lot of respect for Keith Basterfield, who has a beautiful blog he's written in since 2009. Is that right? Or did you start it earlier?
Yeah, it's been going for 10 years now.
Wow. How many articles do you have on there?
There's about 1,050, I think, at the present moment.
That's amazing. I will post links to everybody. It's great.
Yes, the word count is probably over a couple of million, I suspect, at the moment, which is a large number of books when you think about it.
Absolutely. That's incredible. I love it. I love your website. I learn so much every time I go there. And when we went to break, I cut you off right in the middle of saying something. And so if you could continue, that would be wonderful, because this is a fascinating and important conversation.
Certainly. We were saying that some geographic areas produce more activity than others, and we know that some individuals have a really big range of things that happen to them as opposed to other people who never see anything in their life. And we were pondering as to whether there was anything different in terms of the personality or other attributes of individuals who have more experiences than others. And what I found during our 3-year study with psychologists and other medical professionals was that the individuals who were repeatedly reporting experiencing abductions, including visual sightings at various points, had a number of characteristics. They were in more caring professions. So, for example, experiences were in medical professions, nurses, doctors, psychologists, fewer engineers, fewer mathematicians. There seemed to be a distinctive number of professions, or a limited number of professions, that had people who had more experiences. Experiences were... If we used regression hypnosis with them, then we found out that experiences were far more better subjects for hypnotic regression. If you were looking at a scale of sort of 1 to 5, I'd be on a 1. I've tried regression hypnosis. Nothing much happened for myself. To a scale of 5, where you have a person who is completely and utterly receptive to hypnotic regression, then most experiences were in the 4 to 5 range. And that is unusual. That was something that did stand out to us. Another thing is, when you talk to people who are having experiences, they would have a much larger range of paranormal experiences than other people. So, for example, with a person who'd had an abduction experience, they would have poltergeist activity in their house, which only started after their first abduction. They would have a range of other unusual dreams, precognition, senses of deja vu, a whole range of what we would term paranormal experiences. And you could sit and list and tick off all the classic paranormal experiences with an experiencer, and they'd say, yes, I've had that, let me tell you about it. Yes, I've had this, let me tell you about it. And you could then, as a control sample, sit down with one of my friends and say, have you had this experience? And they would say, no, 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 no. So it became very apparent that individuals who were having these experiences were certainly, or had a different set of characteristics from anyone else.
And isn't that fascinating? I know for me, because I've had experiences my whole life, but, after I come back from Skinwalker Ranch, the sounds, it sounds like sometimes you can hear, it sounds like something's crashing, and you come out and there's nothing possible that could have made that sound, or, bizarre things happen with my electronics and different things. And so it is really fascinating, especially after visiting a very highly charged area, when you come back, that the things that follow you home.
Yes, I've found that one of the things you really need to do is you really do need to look at the possibility of other explanations for these things to start with. One of my main factors has always been to look for mundane explanations before accepting the extraordinary. And there are some extraordinary things which survive that, of course. But if you look, speaking of sort of abduction experiences, there are a number of things which you really do need to be familiar with, which can mimic some of the aspects of abductions. And so I guess a number of people would have heard of, say, sleep paralysis. That's you're awake during the night. You say you've been sleeping, you're awake during the night, and your body is actually paralyzed. And you'll find this with experiences. I'll say, I woke during the night, my body was paralyzed, and then something happened to me. Well, unfortunately, with the psychological experience of sleep paralysis, you can have similar sort of things. During dream sleep, your brain is paralyzed, and it paralyzes your muscles, except, strangely, for your eyes. So you can wake paralyzed, and the only thing you can move of your entire body are your eyes. And the reason the brain paralyzes you is to prevent you from such things as, say, leaping out of bed because in a dream you're being chased by an elephant. So over the years, we've found that you can wake paralyzed. But psychological studies of people who report waking paralyzed, when you interview them, they will actually tell you that they can also experience things like reporting the feeling of a presence in a room, or notice strange odors, or see beings in their environment. Now, those people do not associate that with the abduction experience or an abduction experience at all. So the question is, could some of these experiences be due to the psychological condition of sleep paralysis? So in our 3-year study, we actually closely interviewed people about their sleeping patterns and their dream patterns. And we did find that with some people, it did appear that the experience was a psychological episode of sleep paralysis. Now, that doesn't explain many abduction experiences, but you do have to be careful because of the parallels between conventional sleep paralysis and an abduction experience. So that was one area that we were looking at to try and exclude mundane explanations.
And so if you were to tell somebody that is researching this what to look for so they can differentiate between sleep paralysis and an actual abduction, what would be the things that you would say?
Well, the sort of things you'd look for is you would ask questions such as, do you know roughly what time you fell asleep? And then knowing that the brain waves in a human oscillate through a 90-minute cycle. So you fall asleep, you go down into light sleep, you go down into deeper sleep, and you hit the deepest point where your body is really asleep after 90 minutes. You then cycle back up to the surface where you enter REM sleep or rapid eye movement or dream sleep, and then you slide back down to another episode of deep sleep. And during the night, you cycle 6 or 7 times. So say, for example, I fell asleep at 11 o'clock last night, and I wake up 4 multiples of 90 minutes, 1.5 hours, like 6 hours later. So at 5 o'clock in the morning, I wake up. I'm likely to have been in dream sleep at that point. So every 1.5 hours, I'm likely to be in a dream cycle. And it's during that time when your body paralyzes your body when you're in that dream cycle. So who would think of asking an experiencer, what time did you fall asleep? Did you notice the time that you woke up paralyzed? some people did, with having had a look at over 100 people. And what we found is, sure enough, for some people, they were waking up at some combination or some multiple of 1.5 hours, indicating they were in dream sleep. And that's the time when paralysis cuts in. It doesn't happen so much, or if at all, during deep sleep, but it's in this dream period. So there were some actually physical indicators by asking the right questions that we could work out whether or not a person was likely to have been in dream sleep and therefore having sleep paralysis. We published that in the 1990s, 20 years ago now. Most people today would probably have not come across our research from that time. And that's why I mention it now, because it is something that you can do as an investigator, is if you know the right questions you can ask, you can start to help eliminate some of these other mundane causes.
And that is really important. I would love to read more about this and your work with regard to this. This is fascinating.
There were a couple other things to look out for as well. One of my first interests was a topic with a funny name of hypnagogic and hypnopompic imagery. Hypnagogic just means hallucinatory, and these states occur on the borderland between being awake and being asleep. You don't have to be in bed. You could be on night shift, sitting down, you momentarily doze off. You can experience this imagery. And this imagery has been known for hundreds of years, and it seems to be the source of some of the accounts of people waking up during the night to find people in their room. They associate it with the devil in the Middle Ages. And the imagery can be as simple as flickering of lights, flashing of lights as you're dropping off to sleep or waking up. But my research showed that you can have actually complex encounters. And in historical records, you can find in old literature accounts of people waking up in the morning, not paralyzed, just waking up in the morning and finding themselves surrounded by little imps or little devils, which appear to be either some form of paranormal activity or possibly this kind of imagery. But many people have never heard of that kind of imagery. And statistically, something like about 13% of the population has experienced sleep paralysis during their lives, and a higher incidence of people have reported this hypnopompic and hypnagogic imagery, even though they don't know much about it. When you talk to people, particular experiences, you find they have a mix of what appears to be alien intrusions and the more simple things like sleep paralysis and imagery. So that was a sort of fascinating study that I did back in the 1990s and published about it, which came out of looking at abduction experiences.
And I really wish that I lived on the same continent. I wish I could pick your brain for days on end. I mean, it's amazing. And for you to have, you are very serious about what you do, and it shows in all of your work, and that is really cool. You're a great person for people to learn from.
Yes, I've been fortunate to cross the boundary between being a lay person with some knowledge and then being lucky enough to come across individuals in the medical profession who've had an open mind enough to work with me to use regression in a strictly scientific context. There are a number of people who would say that when they hear experiences are regressed by inexperienced people, that it rings alarm bells as to the veracity of the material which is being uncovered. I guess we all are aware of some people who have, I guess, become notorious for the overuse of regression hypnosis with individuals, which has led to all kinds of issues. But I was working with one of the top psychologists who was quite happy to work with me in a proper medical setting to look at all of this. And this is what we find we lack today, is that we can't get enough health professionals, we can't get enough scientists and academics interested in our topic to do serious work, unfortunately.
That is very unfortunate. And I have to ask you, I've got one of your articles pulled up right here, and I'm looking at it, and something that is sticking out to me is the government agency testing mind control weapons. And I wanted to know what your thoughts are on that, because you do hear about certain people that believe that they are having some sort of test, or like Camelio. There's a really great book called Camelio that talks a little bit about that. The main character in that book was based on a real person that had an experience after he stole some military equipment. But what are your thoughts? Is that a common thing? Is that something that is...
It's nothing that we've had in Australia. And it's interesting. Sitting half a planet away from most of those kind of stories that appear generally to come out of the US and very few other countries, the gentleman who first started looking at MyLabs was an Austrian scientist. I forget his second name, but I think it was Helmut was his first name. And he wrote some of the first articles about MyLabs. And he came to me in the 1990s when he was first starting his research, and he said, "Do you have such a thing in Australia?" I said, "Well, we've just looked at about 100 or over 100 people here, and I've never come across this. What's it all about?" So he started to tell me of stories which he was investigating, and at that stage only from the US, where he would have people coming to him talking about military operations involving experiences. So I've actually had no experience here in our country of that. And to me, it seems to be a little more on the, I guess I would have to call it far-fetched nature. I don't dismiss it. But because I've not been able to investigate it firsthand, I'm only working from second and third-hand information from researchers that I've talked to in the US. So, yes, I tend to stay clear of it for the present moment because I just haven't had an opportunity of looking at it myself.
Well, there's so many roads to go down and so many things to look at. It's like you can just so easily go off course, if your focus is not that. But it's hard, too, because I noticed with the MyLab stuff and some of these things that, that people do go down, I think, a conspiracy rabbit hole, and I don't know if it's necessarily, the right thing to do. For sure, if you know what I mean, I think it can be dangerous.
Yes, to each our own. I think for those that have closely worked in that area, I know there are certainly lots of books that have been published by people who say, well, I've had these experiences. Who am I to dismiss that? But it's just that I've had no first-hand experience of coming across anyone here who's had those sort of circumstances. So it becomes difficult. And I guess if I can't take a look at it firsthand, then I tend to put it on the back burner for my research purposes.
Right. Absolutely. And for me, I mean, it's something I've looked into. I live 80 miles away from Bigelow Proving Ground. And they've done some pretty interesting testing, human testing over the years,
yes.
and things there. So it is definitely worthy of looking into and things like that. It's just interesting. Thank you for talking to me about that. With regard to people that are antennas or that have, sightings, abductions, do you find that they're fearful? I mean, is there a pattern? Do they feel it's a threat, or do they feel empowered? And what was the general consensus?
Well, the Australian experience, when we were looking, for example, at something as simple as what kind of entities do Australian experiences report, I was intrigued to find out what is the comparison to the US experience, what is the comparison to the British experience. In the US, we have come to think of the whole abduction experience and phenomena as involving small grey aliens with almond-shaped eyes. In the UK, for example, the classic reported entity there is more of a blonde-eyed blue-eyed, blonde-haired, Scandinavian, tall entity. So back in the 1990s, they were the main characteristics that were coming out of two different sides of the planet. And I thought, well, what would we find here? Because if you were looking at it from a purely psychological or sociological experience, you might think, well, because Australia has been colonised traditionally from Europe, we would follow the UK or European experience of entities and not the US, except that our television and media here predominantly report US experiences. So we went out and interviewed over 100 people and said, well, what is it that you see? And strangely, in Australia, being a mix of US media culture and UK origins, we had a mix of entities. There were as many blue-eyed, blonde-haired, tall entities being reported by experiencers in Australia as there were small grey entities with almond-shaped eyes, which makes you think, if you were studying the sociology of the phenomena, that here was a very interesting mix of our Australian culture producing entities that were not real but were being generated by the cultural representations we were getting from US media and from UK sources. So that was interesting to me, trying to find out just a simple question of individuals who have these kind of antennas or are prone to more encounters than other people. Simply a question of what kind of entity did you see opened up all kinds of research possibilities.
And I have to ask you, because this is fascinating me, but when I look back at and go through my archive and I see kind of how things have been inserted into the UFO community over the decades, could there be some sort of political motivation in inserting the tall, blonde-haired Aryan people into the narrative? I mean, I think it's quite curious.
Yes,
Well,
that's right. Yes, you've got the whole Germanic possibilities that conspiracy theorists love to talk about, and again, you can't dismiss things without looking at it in detail. And the problem is that very few of us have got that opportunity or time or interest to disappear down that kind of rabbit hole. I was fascinated to hear Chris Marks saying that one of the first jobs that he did when he went to work for Bigelow Aerospace was, in fact, to translate some German documents from 1942. I thought, wow, what a thing to be asked to do as your first employment with Bigelow, was to look at something which potentially has one of these conspiracy Germanic possibilities. Right. Yep.
I thought the same thing as well.
That's right. But unfortunately, we just don't have the time ourselves to probe into all these areas.
No, but it is, it's definitely something that has struck a chord in me as I look through all of the periodicals and research. I mean, it's almost like there are definitely some political motivations, I believe, political and religious motivations that pop up and have been kind of seeded into the community. And so, I want to talk to you a little bit more about that. We're getting ready for our big break here.
That's
America Luke at Basterfield, and we will be back after the break.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brizzell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. I am your host, Erica Lukes. Happy to be here on a Friday night. I hope you all had a wonderful week. And it is Friday the 13th. Tina was reminding me on break. And so I think after the show, I'm going to go lock myself in the closet for the rest of the evening before something happens. But that's the way I roll some days. I am always researching and finding out new information, and I am trying to get all of that together and in one spot. I will be adding things to UFOclassified.com and ericalukes.com with regards to some of my interviews that I've conducted with different people on my travels, and they're really wonderful. I look forward to kicking that off with my interview with Chris Marks, which you will be able to see tomorrow. I'll be posting links for that. And again, more information about kind of what went on at Skinwalker Ranch while Chris was there for 6 years, and also his work with Bigelow and Colm Kelleher. So lots of things to look out for. I am here now with an amazing Australian researcher and someone that I've been following for a long time, reading his work. He is meticulous, and I love it. And this is, I dare to dream that I could ever be this thorough, but I'm here with Keith Basterfield. You can go to Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Scientific Research, and it's UFOs/scientificresearch.blogspot.com, and you can go there to read his thousands of articles. It's so cool. I love it. And Keith, welcome back to the show. This has been fascinating so far, and I, again, apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning of the show, but luckily we'll just do it old school style and do it on the phone.
Sounds good.
Absolutely, yes. And so when we left off, we were just talking a little bit about, the different types of entities that we're seeing in different parts of the world, which is fascinating. I know that I've had many conversations with Barry Greenwood about that, and some of the types of sightings, and how much they vary from country to country. That's always fascinated me.
Yes, I guess one interpretation, of course, is that we're being visited by a large range of extraterrestrials, to the other, which is that the fact that there might be, or there are reported differences in entities which are being cited is down to the human interpretation. Over the ages, we've had in the medieval ages people who would report imps or devils coming through to the airship wave of the late 1890s in the US, when we had human inventors. Some people say that the phenomena is paralleling or is just slightly ahead of us, or showing us slightly ahead of technology that we have, and the entities change. So it's a fascinating area to look into.
It really is. It just is so curious, so interesting. Do you feel that religion influences what takes place with regard? And I'm seeing this right now, and I don't know if you noticed this too, but right now there's a big push in the quote-unquote UFO community, I use that term loosely, to kind of demonize things, or to say that these, the Nephilim and some of these things are popping up. I mean, are you noticing more of that, or has that always been there?
I think it's always been there. I think when you look back at, say, apparitions of the Virgin Mary that have popped up over the centuries, particularly at places like Fatima, you have a whole range of interpretations put on what's happening. And the church, of course, is able to, from its long history of involvement with apparent demonic forces, will always remind us that there is good and evil in everything. And so when an individual has an experience, for example, if you wake up paralyzed at night, I must say that happened to me once. I woke up paralyzed one night, couldn't move anything apart from my eyes, and I had the most intense feeling of an evil presence in the room. And if I was religiously oriented, then I might have ascribed that to the devil. The feeling lasted for a little while. I had read of a technique for breaking out of paralysis, which is to move the smallest muscle in your body. I moved my little finger. The paralysis just went away. And at the exact same time, the intense feeling of evil that was present went away as well. It would seem that if I was a psychologist, I would say, well, I've had sleep paralysis and I've had an experience of going back to the reptilian part of my brain, which feared dinosaurs and monsters and generated this feeling of evil. But if I was a priest, I might say, well, I'd had a visitation from something which was demonic. But I think it's always been there. At the present moment, we're just interpreting it in the UFO phenomena as opposed to a broader range of phenomena.
Interesting. Oh, I love it. And so I have to ask you with regard to, some of the people and sightings and abductions. I mean, what are areas that concern you about, or are there any areas that concern you about the abduction phenomena?
Like many people, I have a great suspicion of the free use of hypnosis with regression people. There are, as I mentioned earlier, there's a scale of 1 to 5 of people being susceptible to hypnotic regression, from 1 being not affected at all to 5 completely susceptible. And when you find that a lot of experiences are in the 4 to 5 range, that is, they are highly susceptible to hypnotic regression, you have to be extremely careful as to the individual who is conducting the regression session. It is, from my experience of talking to medical professionals, so easy to influence an individual who's highly susceptible. So if you were to sit down with such an individual, then the person conducting the regression can certainly introduce themes and ideas to the experiencer that are not grounded in reality. And that is one of the big fears that I have. In the UK, one of the researchers there, Jenny Randalls, who is the head of director of research for Befora, the largest organisation in the UK, Befora actually put a ban on using regression hypnosis with experiencers because of their fears of the misuse of it. And so for many, many, many years, experiencers in the UK were interviewed about their conscious recall of experiences, but hypnosis was not used to try and extract additional information. I don't know whether that ban is still on there, but it's something we took in quite seriously here in Australia with medical professionals. My advice was do not let inexperienced people who train and get a paper degree from an internet college loose with regression hypnosis. So that's one of the fears that I have today with people who can, in some states, who are unlicensed for use of hypnotic regression, can actually go out and literally, in one sense, mess with a person's mind. And what it does is it just totally distorts or can totally distort the data that you're getting from that individual, which is a shame.
That is a shame, but I think there are people who we all know that are, in this community who do that. And from what I've seen in a couple cases, I mean, they are absolutely influencing their subject. And that's really frightening.
It certainly distorts data. I remember you probably before your time, but I think it was 1992, Robert Bigelow and the Crown Prince of Liechtenstein, Prince Adam II of Liechtenstein, co-funded a large gathering in Boston. 100 people from around the world were invited to go to Boston. A meeting was sponsored by a fellow called Dr. David Pritchard, and I was the individual invited from Australia. We spent, I think it was 7 days at the MIT in a room there, talking nothing but abductions through that time. We had presentations by people like Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, John Alexander. We had a whole range of cross-section of experiences and medical professionals. We sat down and just talked non-stop, literally for 7 days about the topic. And one of the contentious issues was the use of regression hypnosis. And this was coming from experiences as well as from medical professionals. But that was an interesting time. I mean, it's going back almost 30 years now, and we're still no closer, in one sense, to knowing a lot of or gathering a lot of data from experiences as to what really is occurring.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I love it. I love talking to you about all of this. And I want to ask you, who are some of the big players that a lot of people don't know about that are funding research? Because you mentioned the Prince, and he is definitely a person, that I've heard about, but not a lot of people pay attention to. But he has been a big supporter of UFO research.
Yes, and I guess the two key people who put literally millions of dollars into it are Robert Bigelow and the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince was particularly interested to start off with from reading Jacques Vallée's diaries. Jacques Vallée visited the Prince in Liechtenstein and recorded some of his interests and comments in his series of diaries that had been published. And from what he says, the Prince originally started off being interested, like many aerospace companies are, in trying to find out if you could figure out the propulsion system for UFOs, which leads into the possibility of free energy and a whole range of topics. And it seems to me that there are probably other hidden people who we just don't know who've put money into the topic over the years. I wish I could find someone similar in Australia, but we've never come across anyone with deep pockets with that sort of interest, unfortunately.
Well, it sounds like there is a gentleman, Christopher Foyle, I believe, who was a bookseller, owned a large foils bookstores in England, and he now, I believe, is in Monaco and has started a research organization. And it looks like he is giving grants away. So that would be interesting.
That's excellent.
Have you heard anything about him?
I haven't. No, I've heard of the brand of bookstores,
okay,
but I haven't come across him at all. No.
I'll send you a link. It's quite interesting. So, and that's again somebody that most people don't really know about. So I've been kind of researching behind the scenes and things, and I find it fascinating. So I love it. But I want to talk about, because I know that you have done a lot of work with regard to the Stars Academy. You've also done, and you wrote a blog about Kit Green and things, and I'm wondering if you could just weigh in on that, your thoughts about TTSA and the direction.
Well, I think their approach of combining political lobbying, educating the masses, and also looking at such things as the analysis of reported UFO fragments has achieved some successes, for which they really need to be applauded. It's something which I think surprised us, that traditionally UFO groups have gathered together, they've self-funded, they've self-investigated, they've published newsletters, magazines, they've tried to some extent political lobbying. But in one sense, out of the blue comes a left field approach, which is an individual who has an interest and has managed to catch the ear of quite some interesting people. through their own powers of lobbying, has managed to bring together this group that's had some successes. So I certainly applaud the fact that this is happening. But in my opinion, they've actually lacked some analytical skills, which I thought I would have seen at such a level. So, for example, with such things as the 3 released videos, one of them, which they've titled Go Fast, the object, when you look at the data which is shown on the forward-looking infrared radar images taken from the aircraft in the video, which give you data of altitude, speed, etc., etc. The Go Fast object is clearly not near the sea. It's not near the sea surface. It's not traveling particularly fast. You can work out by basic school geometry and calculate that the object is about 13,000 feet up above the sea level. You can calculate from its angular size that it's a small size, maybe 9-10 feet long, and it's moving at a relatively slow speed. And errors of that kind indicate that they do need somebody who has an ability to conduct analytical work. So I congratulate them for political lobbying, educating us, the Unidentified TV series, publishing, being able to release the videos. But some of the stuff they lack, what they could probably do with is a good UFO researcher. And I know they've distanced themselves from the UFO community, but I think that's one of the things that I would suggest that they need to do, is to work with a select group of UFO researchers, not reinvent the wheel, and bring in some good analysts. Robert Bigelow's NIDS and also his 2007 to 2010 study had a number of analysts working for him, and it's essential to not only collect data but to analyse it correctly. And one issue I have with TTSA is that in many instances they've shown a lack of analytical ability. But overall, I would give them 9 out of 10 for what they're doing. I think people who are negative about them really need to think, well, what have I achieved? What has MUFON achieved? What have the large UFO organisations achieved? Have we been able to do the sort of things which TTSA today is doing? So if you were to put me down as a supporter, I'd say, well, I am. And I'd give them quite high marks for what they've been able to do. But there are certainly other things which they could get involved with.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, I will say, there was, and I mean, I still am a little bit leery just because I hear some of the wording that Luis Elizondo and Tom DeLonge use in, the threat. I mean, they're definitely playing that angle up a lot. But I do think that for an article to be on the front page of the New York Times talking about this issue back in December 17th, 2000, and was it 17 or 18? I think it was 17. But when that article hit,
17, yes.
It really, yeah. I mean, that gave.
I think though that even say the yes, true, but even some of the heads of some of our large UFO organisations make some bizarre claims at times. And I guess this is human nature. I think with somebody like Tom DeLonge, we've got an individual who is, like many of us, obsessed with the topic, has done their own research, formed their own opinions, goes off the rails occasionally, but has been wise enough to bring together a group of advisors who do talk more along the lines that I think we need to be going. So with a group of people, there's always a combination of the visionaries, the analysts, the people quietly sitting behind the scenes like Jim Sivian, who apparently is an experiencer of his own on his own account, who are supporting such an organisation. But like everybody, we've all got our human foibles. So I agree there are issues that you and I would have with them.
And so who right now do you really think is doing exceptional work in the field?
I think it's people behind the scenes that we don't hear enough from, unfortunately.
Right.
I've done a fairly deep study over the years and following the career, both professionally and his UFO interests and his paranormal interests, of Kit Green. Kit Green's been around since the 1970s with an interest in a whole range of phenomena. He's had access to people and resources that you and I only dream about. And he, like everyone else, has made mistakes, like, for example, getting into the whole Serpico episode of US astronauts going to another planet to visit aliens. He was involved in the whole middle of that episode. But at the same time, he and people like Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée, from what you hear behind the scenes, are conducting the sort of true, rigorous scientific research that we would like to do. So, for example, take fragments from UFOs. There's been lots and lots of claims over the years from a whole range of UFO researchers, scientists even, about the fact that there are some unusual properties to fragments which have been linked to UFO crashes. What's the truth about that? A lot of people have come forward, written books about it, made all sorts of claims. We've even had, I remember with Roswell in the 1990s, we had a scientist from a university in California hold a press conference claiming he had definite proof that a fragment from Roswell was extraterrestrial. That was, I think, about 15 years ago. We've never heard any more from him. So there's a whole range of people who are doing quiet research, and the people that I would love to know more about, even though I've talked to them about these sort of things, they're fairly guarded about what they have found, would be Jacques Vallée and Gary Nolan at the moment, together with Kit Green and Gary Nolan doing their research into individuals and the effects of an exposure to close encounters with the phenomena. So those are the type of people that I think are doing the probably better research at the moment, probably better than TTSA, because members of TTSA have been making extravagant claims about some of the fragments that they've got. The main one which is being touted at the moment is a fragment that came through Art Bell and Linda Moulton Howe back 20 years ago, which they claim has some unusual properties, but TTSA have produced no raw laboratory-based data on these fragments, nothing to substantiate the claims, and I'm awaiting a peer-reviewed journal article which says this is a link to something unusual, it has these properties, we think it could bear further examination, and that's the way that we might get hard science further involved with it. But at the moment we don't have scientific confirmation that TTSA have got something really unusual. So I think the key, or the better players in that sense, that's doing the hard science, are people like Jacques Vallée, Gary Nolan, and Kit Green.
I want to talk more about all of them when we get back from break. I'm Erica Lukes here with Keith Basterfield. You can go to UFOclassified.com. I'll be providing links to all of Keith's work and much, much more. Stick around. We will be right back.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
When you look to the stars, what do you see?
For this thing just to do what it did, there's nothing that we know of. Not drone aircraft, not anything that has this type of performance capability.
Saturdays at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Join Misha Johnston and Tana Newberry for Starseed Awakening. You'll hear first-hand accounts from Misha and Tana, as well as from an array of experienced guests, what it's like to be contacted by numerous extraterrestrial groups.
You know, I'm thinking that a lot of the terror and a lot of the fear that I was reacting with and the pain I was experiencing had nothing to do with anything that was being inflicted on me, and it was just sort of an accident of circumstance.
We'll explore the world of our shadow government and their involvement with black ops, such as My Labs, MK Ultra, and other trauma-based mind control projects.
And when I was pulled out of my motel room in the middle of the night to go out there, those of us that were taken out there were taken at gunpoint. And I think that it was to immediately impress upon us that we were being taken in a special way to a special place for a special operation.
Starseed Awakening with Misha Johnston and Tana Newberry. There's no missing time here, just illuminating conversation.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Starseed Awakening, Saturdays at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, only on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
$1,000,000 miles till midnight. A story of timelines, artificial worlds, simulated races, and the galactic imprint, and the destiny of a blue world called Earth. 1,000,000 miles till midnight, written by Solaris Blue Raven, is a journey through the mind's eye, which allows the reader to surf a wave of technological and multidimensional intellect, revealing a bridge between conscious design and the truth. A multidimensional bleed-through awakens the world of artificial intelligence to set sail into the frontiers of a vast multiverse, morphing planets and terraforming ascended worlds beyond the linear programs of a fated race. 1,000,000 miles till midnight will awaken, inspire, prepare, and enlighten one to the many multidimensional states of consciousness and worlds we reside in. With every cell and atom, we are this truth and multiverse. 1,000,000 miles till midnight. Written by Solaris Blue Raven. Available now at Amazon.com. Don't wait. Get your copy today.
1, 2, 3, 4! You are listening to the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Love the music. Oh, I listen all day.
The future of radio is here and now.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio Contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the final segment of my show. It is always with great sadness that I come back to this segment because I could talk for hours and hours to my guests. I love the people that I bring on the show. They're incredibly important and can teach us all about good work and patience and research and open our eyes to different people who have been inspirations for them. I love it. I'm here with Keith Basterfield, and you can check out his blog. I will give you all the links, post that in chat as well. He has been involved and loved the topic of UAPs since the 1960s. He lives in Australia and has done a lot of really great research over the years, and I always go to his blog and look for him and things. And so it's just been it's fun. And Keith, I love having you here. And like I said at the beginning of the show, I am sad that we, did not connect sooner, but we have now. So we'll just make sure that we're always in touch.
Definitely there.
Absolutely. And so, there's so many places that I would love to go with you. I'm going to have you back on the show. But we were talking about, To the Stars Academy and then some people that were making great contributions to the subject. If you were to give somebody, like a lot of people that are listening right now, really have a passion for this. They're very intelligent. They want to learn and investigate. What would be some advice that you would give my audience?
Yeah, I've often thought about this, is what can you do as an individual? You think, well, I can't do much. I read books, I listen to podcasts, I research on the internet, but what can I actually contribute? And I think my best advice would be to find an area of the phenomena which particularly interests you as an individual. And it could be anything, but research it as deeply as you can. Surprisingly, as I've mentioned, on occasions, I've done a piece of work which I found no one had done before, which has surprised me. You might take a look at the physiological effects of close encounters. You might think, well, I work I work looking at technical areas. I'm an engineer. You could look at radar events, or you could think, well, I wonder whether or not there's anything to the topic of military associations with abductions. I think you have to be energized by a topic that's close to you. So, for example, if you were a psychologist, you might think, I wonder if there's anything more to abduction experiences than psychological processes, and start you thinking along those lines. And you have the expertise in that sense to look at it. But then I think the next thing to do is to actually digest all you can on that particular topic. I'm a great lover of still having hard copy books around, but there's so much available on the internet, although you do have to screen it. There are podcasts you can listen to. Seek out others that are particularly interested in your particular topic. So you might want to know about what happens to people who have close encounters. Are they affected by radiation? Are they affected by microwaves? Do they have any after effects? Do they become more religious after close encounters? And there are people who've written whole books just on those topics. So read what others have written on your topic of interest. You might consider starting up a website or blog and publishing your findings. You can set up a blog website in 5 minutes these days. You don't have to have any technical knowledge whatsoever. And there's no such thing as a naive question. You might start looking at a particular topic and think, well, these are my views after I've read it. What do others think? And then go to build on what you've come across. And one of the key things is finding someone to debate and discuss your topic with. It's so much easier when you have a like-minded spirit who you can talk about the topic because your neighbour or a member of your family isn't interested. Now, over the years, I've been associated with a number of UFO organisations, and one of the things people ask me is it worthwhile joining a UFO group? And there's been lots over the years. APRO's come and gone, MUFON's there. I've been involved with a group here called the Australian Centre for UFO Studies. But I can actually personally say that the best move I made was to go independent in about 2009 and conduct my own research and publish it. And today the blog I'm associated with is 10 years old. It's published over about 1,000 blog posts. And people say, well, what do you actually blog about? And I say, well, it's not current activities most of the time. It's things I'm actually interested in. I might research a new topic for a month and then just write a 1,000-word blog about it. But that's the way that I've found that as an individual you can contribute to the topic. I research items that interest me, but really it's a matter of just finding something which intrigues you. Have you ever thought about this aspect or that aspect? You can't cover the entire subject of the phenomena. It's too deep and too complex. But I find individuals networking together as opposed to belonging and spending your time with organisations are really the way that I've found the best use of my time. But certainly as an individual, you can make a contribution to the topic. And I would urge any listeners to think about what it is that they may find of interest or fascination and go from there and collect information. But more importantly, discuss it with other people and find some way of publishing it. anyone can make a contribution.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful advice. And even, just getting out in your community, Barry Greenwood's been on the show several times, and just, like encouraging people to get involved in archiving or going out to specific locations where there's a lot of activity and interviewing witnesses and getting that on record and things. There's so many cool things that you could do with regard to this. And for me, I love everything I've learned. Except maybe the people part. The people in the community are a little bit special, but I mean, I've learned more about the natural world. I've learned more about everything. It has made me, it has enriched me as a person. And I love that.
Yes, I think there's great value in archival research. People think you do have to be a people person and need to go out and interview people about their sightings. But there's a whole area that if you're a little bit more introvertish or academic or nerdish, there's an archival research area that you can really get into. And unfortunately today, there's an increasing number of older UFO researchers like myself who are passing away. And there's a wealth of archival material available to study, much of it located in universities. They have special collections. I know that I've accessed some of James E. McDonald's collections in the University of Arizona. Even down from Australia, I've been able to get hold of some of his audio recordings of interviews he did with people here in Australia from the 1960s and 70s. And that's of great interest. And perhaps not enough of us are doing that sort of archival research. And a recent collection worth mining is that from somebody like Stanton Friedman. And even Jacques Vallée's mentioned that he's archived a number of boxes of his material with a US university to make it accessible to students. It's pretty hard work.
What I heard about Vallée, though, is it is tedious and pretty unforgiving sometimes. I mean, I spent a week over at the University of Utah Special Archives going through Dr. Salisbury's work. And it excites me. I think it is just absolutely incredible to hold a piece of paper, the actual eyewitness report from, his book, The Utah UFO Display. I mean, so I love it, but I can see how other people might not be the thing for them. But it is incredibly important. And it's also important to me, that we keep the research, our American research here in America, for American researchers. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it seems like a lot of our work is getting sent overseas, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. But
yes, there's not enough people like Barry Greenwood spending time archiving material for our use. And it is time-consuming. I know Barry's just been with, I think it's Jen Aldrich, to Chicago to mine the Center for UFO Studies archives. And the two of them were working like 14 hours a day scanning material. And surprisingly, buried in a cupboard in somebody's a basement, they found a cardboard box full of material labelled Australia, which Barry has now had shipped to his place to scan for people like Paul Dean and myself in Australia. So I know what you mean. Some of our archival material has ended up in Chicago, but shortly we're going to be able to access it electronically.
And that'll be wonderful. I remember when Barry found that the last time he went out there, and he sent me a picture of it. He said that Paul was thrilled and things like that, and that it always is nice when you find something like that. I wish I could find more like that with regard to Utah, because Utah has been a very difficult place to find research, and it's shockingly so. And even Barry has mentioned that to me. We've had lots of discussions about that because he's tried to find things on Utah, and he's always commented on how difficult it is and how little we really have.
Yes, and a project that AFU have done has been to digitise a lot of Australian periodicals. So like yourself, I've now got an electronic edition of many of the classic Australian periodicals that have been published since the 1950s. And it's just so great to have them sitting on your computer that you can go and have a look at.
That's wonderful. That is really good. And I've got a question here from Jeff, who asked this in chat. He wants to know how the Australian government is. Are they openly involved in UFO research? And if you see a UFO, where do you report it?
Well, in Australia, the government started off being interested in the 1950s. So in our National Australian Archives, you can electronically access now something like over 100 Australian government files on UFOs. They actively researched, and that was done by our Department of Defence, our Royal Australian Air Force from the 1950s, when they finally gave it away, overtly at least, in 1994, and their material ended up in the National Archives. So I worked for 3 years with a group of people to literally pay for the digitisation of that material, which now anyone can access. So that's what their interest was. Their findings were like many other governments around the world. Their findings were that there was some scientifically interesting unidentified cases buried in the material that were reported to the Department of Defence here in Australia, but they weren't the scientific area to look at the topic. So the government were recommended to allow one of our scientific areas in the government to look at the topic, but that never happened. Today, the Air Force declined to accept UFO reports, the same as the US Air Force have done since around about 1969. They say they have no official interest. Whether that's true or not, of course, we don't know. But they maintain they have no official interest. And if you were to contact a RAF base here in Australia to report something, they would direct you to a local UFO group or to our local police. There are organisations in Australia, civilian organisations, that gather reports. So if I was Jeff and I wanted to report something, I would be going to the internet and looking up UFO Research New South Wales, UFO Research Queensland, and reporting through one of the two big Australian UFO groups that are still with us. But the Air Force gave it away overtly over almost 20 years ago now. I, through the good fortune of another researcher here, our group that I was involved with in those days managed to interview the top Department of Defence scientist who was involved with the Air Force investigating UFOs in Australia and get access to some of his behind-the-scenes data. But officially, in Australia, it's reporting to civilian UFO groups now. Unfortunately, the government says they have no interest.
Oh, interesting. Oh, that's too bad. And I have to ask you, because we've got 6 minutes left before show close. The Min lights have always fascinated me. So tell me just a little bit about what you know about the Min lights.
Like many other countries, and like the example in, I always not quite certain how to pronounce it, Hestelen in Norway, is it? Which has these same sort of lights. So they're generally found in rural settings or isolated settings. In Australia, it's in certain remote areas of one of our eastern states. And what people have reported over many years, ever since Aboriginal settlement here in Australia, is that you will find, generally seen a long distance, sometimes close up, balls of light which seem to be self-contained, self-moving. In some sense, people report them being intelligent. That is, they seem to be interactions between these balls of light. So in Australia, they're called Min lights. They're reported, again, from limited geographic areas. They're not spread entirely over the country. And there are many, many hundreds of reported encounters with them still today. So you can go for yourself to some of these areas, and if you're lucky enough, you can see these small points of light, generally only at night. I've heard of some daylight sightings, but they're pretty rare. So we've got the equivalent of the sort of balls of light which would be seen on Skinwalker Ranch or in Utah and various other places, or in fact a number of places throughout the world. But in Australia, they're referred to as Min lights.
Have you ever seen them?
I I haven't, no. I mean, the closest I've come is sitting on hilltops up in our mid-north back in the late 60s, early 70s, trying to see for ourselves these orange balls of light or red balls of light which were seen on the hills. I mean, the closest I've actually come was the example I gave earlier in the show, where some colleagues of us on our two-way radio said there's a light running down the hill in front of you. They could clearly see a small orb of light coming down the hillside at night. I was on the top of the hill looking downwards. I could absolutely see nothing. And you can only say, well, how can you have a one-sided light? But that's exactly what happened that night. And other people with min lights have said you can see them from certain directions and not from others. So we seem to have something playing with the laws of physics.
Wow, that is so interesting. I love it. Oh my gosh. Where do you think the paranormal leaves and the UFO, the ET phenomenon begins? Because to me, they're all so interconnected. And I find it very interesting that
I like
a
that
lot of
word.
researchers separate that, you know?
Yeah, I like that word, interconnected or intertwined. It's certainly my experience has been since day one when I started investigating. There has not been, I haven't been able to separate the UFO phenomena from what other people call paranormal. I'd like to say the whole thing is in some way meshed together. And if we're looking for potential explanations, it's just as fascinating to me to interview someone who will talk about poltergeists moving things in their house as it is to interview a witness who said, well, I saw a metallic disc during the broad daylight. But that's because my experience has always been right from day one. I've interviewed, for example, a lot of experiencers who've had near-death experiences. A lot of what happens after abduction experience, that the after effects parallel what happens to people who have near-death experiences. A lot of research has been done by people like John Alexander in that area. So like you, I find the whole thing intertwined. I can't separate the two things. I think people who try to are trying to say, well, we'll only get hard science interest in radar sightings and maybe pilots seeing things. We can't get them interested in these other bits and pieces, so therefore we'll exclude them from the discussion. And I think really that is a wrong approach.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely. It's you know, when you have all of these things happening, how can you say, you know, where one thing leaves and the other one begins? And I also think it's interesting to me to ask people if they, you know, why do we think that this is extraterrestrial? And I'm not quite sure where,
yes.
You know, that it got inserted into the narrative or why. But it's fascinating to me because I'm not going to jump on the ship saying, because I'm seeing something unexplainable, that it's extraterrestrial. But what are your thoughts?
One of the questions people ask me is, what do you think the phenomena is? What's its origins? And I appreciate the extraterrestrial approach, but because from the very early age I'm aware of the size of the universe, I've kept up with physics. Yes, we are making some tremendous advances, but I don't look at the ETH as the answer at the present moment. I like to explore a whole range of options. It is, to me, just simply one of the options, but perhaps it's an option which we need to explore a little further as we advance in our physical knowledge. But yes, I'm not sold on that as the answer at the present moment either.
Yeah, that is interesting. And how do you feel about, you know, the fact that we're seeing, and I mentioned this earlier in the show, a lot of, you know, like TTSA and different groups labeling this a threat. Do you feel that there is a dire threat?
No. In all my experience with interviewing close encounter witnesses, people who see distant lights, people who've had paranormal experiences, I've done some deep research into near-death experiences, what I find is that it overwhelmingly is a positive phenomena. The percentage of negativity or negative encounters with the phenomena, from my own experience, have been very, very small. It seems to be an overwhelmingly positive effect on individuals who are involved, particularly at close range. I can understand why this approach is being done by TTSA about a threat, because they're trying to get the US government to take a good, hard, new look at the phenomena. And because it's defense-orientated and the people who are involved with the TTSA, their background, I can see why they're arguing for that. I don't agree with that approach, though.
Right. Absolutely. I don't either. And I think it's to me, it just feels like another control system. It's like they're just trying to take something that is truly awe-inspiring and beautiful more often than not and turn it to a control system to instill fear. And I've seen that, specifically with Skinwalker Ranch and some of the ideas that have been seeded in the Uinta Basin about the threat that these objects are causing cancer and A, B, C, and D, and it's a demonic portal to hell and all of these things. And you just think, oh, wow.
I think we have to counter that with research of our own and discuss and debate these issues. They're certainly out there, and there are people who want to run with it. Hopefully, in the end, the lack of evidential data. Yeah. Right. And that would be a good discussion. I might have to have you back on and get a couple other people and have a discussion about that. That would be fun. I would like that. And I'm looking forward to having you back on the show. I knew it would be absolutely delightful to have you here. And I look forward to establishing a really good friendship with you and learning from you. So thank you. I've enjoyed it as well. Yes, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you so much. And everyone can find you if you go to Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Scientific Research. You can go to Keith's blog and read all of his wonderful articles and read about his research and things. And it's just been a real pleasure. So all of you, thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for being here. Stick around for a great night on KCOR. Willie Miranda is up next, and I will catch you guys next week.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of